A very good evening and welcome to Primetime News on MTV Sports. My name is Ravi Gamage.
And I'm Punchani Abirasinghe. Time now to take a look at your headlines.
The US ambassador to Sri Lanka says that the Sri Lankan government did not submit a secret plan to the US Secretary of State. The president pays homage to the sacred tooth relic. The US decides to exempt 7 countries, including Sri Lanka, from economic sanctions.
Starting off with local news, the United States of America has exempted 7 countries, including Sri Lanka, from economic sanctions in return for cutting imports of Iranian oil.
The United States imposed sanctions on Iran over its controversial nuclear program last December. At the time, the United States also warned that countries dealing with Iran could also be subjected to sanctions. Iran is the main oil supplier to Sri Lanka, accounting for 93% of total imports. Iran is the 5th largest oil exporter in the world. The Sapugaskanda oil refinery, which produces around 50,000 barrels a day, is almost entirely dependent on Iranian crude oil, and this has been of concern to Sri Lanka. Following US sanctions on Iran, Sri Lanka also had to seek alternate suppliers to fulfill its crude oil requirement, as it had to demonstrate to Washington a significant cut in the crude it imports from Iran in order to qualify for a waiver. The US is Sri Lanka's biggest trading partner, and Sri Lanka's exports to the US last year stood at $2.1 billion, while imports stood at around $300 million. Accordingly, Sri Lanka shifted to Saudi Arabia and Oman to fulfill its crude oil requirement. Under the US law signed in December, countries were given time until the 28th of June to significantly reduce oil imports from Iran or be cut off from the US financial system. US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that by reducing Iran's oil sales, they want to send a decisive message to Iran's leaders to satisfy the concerns of the international community with regard to its nuclear program. Accordingly, waivers were granted to Sri Lanka, India, South Korea, Malaysia, South Africa, Taiwan and Turkey. These countries will not be subjected to any sanctions for a potentially renewable period of 180 days. The United States says that Iranian oil exports have fallen from 2.5 million barrels per day to between 1.2 to 1.8 million barrels. Further talks between Iran and 6 world powers, Britain, US, China, Russia, France and Germany, are due to be held in Moscow next week over Iran's nuclear program, which Tehran insists is for peaceful purposes.
United States Ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, Patricia Butane, says that there was no secret human rights action plan that was submitted to the US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton during External Affairs Minister Professor G.L. Peiris' recent visit to Washington. She made this comment exclusively to News First's Shamir Razuldin in Colombo today.
Professor G.L. Peiris, addressing Parliament following the tabling of the LLRC recommendation, said that the international community has to give the government time and space to implement the recommendations. However, 3 months on, the US-backed resolution comes into play in Geneva. Can results be achieved promptly, ma'am?
The clock didn't start ticking when the LLRC report was tabled. It actually started when the war ended. So.
But do you agree that reconciliation is a long and tough process to achieve?
Sure it is, of course it is. And that's why we have focused so much of our energy and attention and offered support on it. But I think that the government sometimes has shifted its resources and attention to other areas like economic development, which, as I said, are important, but that doesn't get to the heart of reconciliation. And so I think that it's only fair to also acknowledge, as Minister Peiris has, that Secretary Clinton publicly said, give the LLRC time to do its work through its hearings, come up with its recommendations. So 2 years after that fact, when they started, that's what we're looking at, and that's where we appreciate what's been done, but we see how much more needs to be done.
Taking a look at the past track record of the United States government itself, there has been different yardsticks. It seems that there has been different yardsticks for developing countries and the country, the United States government itself. Has that been the case?
No, I don't think so. I think we adhere to general overall principles of human rights. That's not to say that our own record isn't subject to criticism or questioning, and when that happens, we agree that people have a right to examine our own actions. I don't see that there is a double standard.
Professor Peiris met with the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in Washington, D.C. I want to know what was the outcome of this particular meeting in question.
Well, I can't talk about diplomatic conversations, but the secretary before the meeting talked to the press and talked about her focus on the LRC recommendations and looking forward to hearing about what the government had in mind to implement them. She mentioned some other issues that she wanted to talk about, among them accountability for alleged human rights violations. We were very happy with the meeting. That's not to say, though, that all the expectations were met.
Ambassador, you said expectations were not met. What do you mean by that?
Well, the secretary was briefed on the government's way forward to get to an action plan. Okay, that the minister and his colleagues briefed about the steps the government was taking to produce an action plan to implement the LRC.
You said that an action plan was discussed. Does that mean that an action plan was submitted by Professor G.L. Pierce to the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
There was no secret plan. I think that there's this misconception in the press and among society at large that there was some sort of secret action plan, and there was none.
At the start of the year, Ambassador, the United States government wanted countries that depend on Iranian oil exports to cut down oil and make a significant contribution towards this particular goal in question. I want to know the developments with regard to taking such actions by the Sri Lankan government in terms of moving towards and addressing and fulfilling the needs of the U.S. government.
I have to say that the Sri Lankan government has worked very closely with us, has reduced its imports from Iran. I don't have this specific percentage, I think as we announced, Washington announced yesterday, Sri Lanka is among the second group of economies that will benefit from a waiver from any kind of financial sanctions imposed on their institutions. So I think it's from a point of view of cooperation with us, I think it's very much a success story. The government was very, very cooperative.
You can watch the full interview with Ambassador Patricia Butanis on Thursday at 9:45 p.m. on MTV Sports.
Meanwhile, Minister of Petroleum Industries Susil Premajayantha said that Sri Lanka can continue to import 10 oil shipments from Iran.
ඉරානයෙන් ගෙන්නන නැවල් තොග 13 වෙනුවට 10 දක්වා ගෙන්වීමටත් ඒ ඉතුරු තොග 3 ඔමානයෙන් සහ සෞදි අරාබියෙන් මිලදී ගැනීමටත් අවශ්‍ය.
We took measures to reduce the number of oil shipments from Iran to 10 from 13 and to obtain the remaining 3 shipments from Oman and Saudi Arabia. Since they were satisfied, 7 countries have been exempted from economic sanctions. Earlier, 11 countries had been exempted. Thereby, we have the opportunity to import 10 shipments from Iran. The remaining shipments will be obtained from Oman and Saudi Arabia. The issue that we are now facing is that Iranian crude is the most suitable for our oil refinery, but these shipments have been reduced to 10 from 13. For several years, we imported oil from there. Furthermore, they supplied oil on 4 months interest-free credit.
මාස 4ක පොලි රහිත මිලට තමයි එයා දුන්නේ.
President Mahinda Rajapaksa paid homage to the sacred temple of the Tooth Relic in Kandy this morning. Meanwhile, President Rajapaksa called on the chief prelate of the Malwatha chapter, the most venerable Tibetuave Sri Sumangala Thera, at the Malwatha Vihara last evening.
"124 torchbearers carried the flame on the 25th day of the London Olympics torch relay today.
The first torchbearer of the day was Lindsay Rennie. The torch was carried over 132.60 miles through 21 communities today. Meanwhile, the Queen's granddaughter Zara Phillips has been selected to compete for Team Great Britain at London 2012. 31-year-old Zara Phillips has been chosen as part of the 5-person eventing team. It will be her first Olympics after missing Athens in 2004 and Beijing in 2008 because her former horse, Taytown, was injured on both occasions.
Welcome back to the news. The Janata Vimukti Peramuna says it is prepared to prove that the benefit of the declining world oil prices could in fact be passed on to the public. The JVP has issued an open challenge to the government or officials of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation to debate on the matter.
JVP MP Andhra Kumar Dissanayake made these comments in a communique issued in response to a release issued by the Minister of Petroleum Industries yesterday. The ministry's release was in response to JVP General Secretary Tilvin Silva's statement that the government was not letting the people reap the benefits of declining world market oil prices. JVP MP Andhra Kumar Dissanayake has said that the government and the Petroleum Corporation were spreading false propaganda in order to hide the corruption and wastage at the Petroleum Corporation.
In related news, UNP General Secretary Tis Attanayake says that the government has used fuel prices to imprison the people. He expressed this view at a media briefing today.
මේ වෙනකොට ලෝක වෙළඳපොලේ තෙල් මිල ඉතාමත් ශීඝ්‍රයෙන් පහළ බස්මින් තිබෙනවා.
Crude oil prices in the world market have seen a dramatic decline. The price of a barrel of crude oil in the world market had decreased to $83. This is a record low. This is the biggest drop in the past year. The government is making no attempt to pass on this benefit to the public. It is clear that the government has no proper plan to purchase oil when prices have fallen in the world market and pass on that benefit to the public. According to data we have received, a litre of diesel can be sold at between 90 to 92 rupees.
රුපියල් 90ත් 92ත් අතර මුදලකට දෙන්න පුළුවන්.
Here are some of the comments we received on our website www.newsfirst.lk on passing on the advantage or disadvantage of the world oil price fluctuations to the general public. Chanaka has said, quote, although a decrease was witnessed in world oil prices, there were fluctuations in the prices recently that too needs attention, unquote. Vijay Mudalige has pointed out that if prices can be increased when world market prices increase, why can't they be reduced when world market prices decrease? Harsha has said, quote, the benefits of decreasing oil prices is always enjoyed only by the government, unquote. In addition to viewing our website www.newsfirst.lk for the latest news, you could also log on to our Facebook fan page. You could forward your views and suggestions on our stories through our Facebook fan page as well. You can simply log on to facebook.com/newsfirst.
Still in local news, the Graduate Employees Union engaged in a demonstration today based on 4 demands. The demonstration was conducted opposite the Ministry of Public Administration and Home Affairs.
The Graduate Employees Union that gathered at the DS Junction in Boralla began marching to the Ministry of Public Administration and Home Affairs. The demonstrators called for the abolition of the Program Officer Service Constitution that was enacted on the 14th of February 2012, which they claimed had curtailed the rights of graduates. They demanded that graduates categorized under the MN4 salary scale in the state sector be listed under the MN5 salary scale. They also called on the government to approve the Sri Lanka Development Service legislation that has been forwarded by the Graduates Employees Union in lieu of the Program Officer Service Constitution. The demonstrators were provided the opportunity of discussing their problems with the relevant authorities, including the Minister of Public Administration and Home Affairs. During this discussion, an agreement was reached to do away with the Program Officer Service Constitution and replace it with the Development Services Constitution. These requests have been considered as 100% fair. Moreover, it was also agreed to hold another discussion on the 12th of July at 10 a.m. presided by the Minister and the relevant officials with the Graduate Employee Union in this regard.
Let's now take a look at the cartoon of the day, which we selected from amongst today's English newspapers.